I'm Asger. You can ask me anything. Today I'm going to answer this question. Do you think there's meaning in life? If so, does there have to be something bigger, further, or beyond to put meaning into context, or even to create meaning itself? God, or universal consciousness, or life after death, karma, that type of thing. Can there be meaning without there being something beyond? It's hard to frame the question properly, but hopefully you get my point. Cheers. I think I get your point. I also want to say that I am consciously aware that whatever I say right now, when I watch it again tomorrow or next week or a month from now, I can almost with total certainty say that I'm gonna be unhappy with the answer I provided. So, okay, but let's try to dive into it. I was actually planning on starting with a definition of meaning, but I'll put it on the screen here. As you can see, none of these definitions really match what I think we're talking about here. So normally I tend to focus on what we can describe as objective facts or statements, and on that basis arrive at some probability level. But I think that what we perceive as meaningful is just that. It is something that is perceived as meaningful, experienced as meaningful. It is therefore, by definition, subjective. I mean, we can of course take a step back and say, well, objectively speaking, these people subjectively experience meaning. That's fine, we can do that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether there's meaning in life. And I want to make this distinction. This is a tiny little proposition we're talking about. I mean, Simon could have asked, is there meaning to life? But he, I think, deliberately asked whether there's meaning in life. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna give some examples of stuff I perceive as meaningful, but I do this knowing that they're probably not in any objective sense meaningful. It's my impression that most people want to believe that there is a deeper meaning, not just in life, but with life as well. And I guess if I accept the fact that meaningfulness is subjective by definition, I can actually sort of agree to this. I cannot, however, because of the way I'm wired, because of the way I look at the world, I can't really defend a position where you make up some meaning and then you seek facts to support that meaning. My own sense of meaning in life has changed radically over the years, to be honest. I still get this occasional feeling of being part of something that's larger than life. And I can also say that when that happens, it is 9 out of 10 times that is when I have some sort of experience with other people. I seem to find meaning in other people, essentially. And I also really have come to believe that without other people, we are close to nothing. I mean, we sort of mirror ourselves in other people, and we can sometimes hear people say something and respond to them. This resonates with me. Can you say something that resonates with yourself? I don't know that you can. So I think the relationships we have with other people are very often one of the major things that we perceive as meaningful. Also, specifically perhaps working towards a mutual goal, I have found value in that in the past. Even something as one-sided as me talking to the camera right now. I know you guys are gonna listen to it later, and some people are gonna push back on some of the things I say. Others are gonna agree, offer elaborations, and I find meaning in that too. But I want to actually share another observation with you. As most of you will know, I also have a podcast called MetaQuest, link for that below. But I've actually really come to find a certain frustration in running this podcast. And I'm just going to say the way I feel about it right now. I feel that to some extent I am throwing pearls before swine. Well, first of all, people presuppose, it seems, that I don't have anything of value to tell them or to share with them. And they also seem to misunderstand what I say and what the guests on the podcast say. So this mission I had to sort of share some meaning I have found in the world and in my life with other people isn't really going that well. Because I find that the vast majority of people who click on those podcast episodes only listen to 1 or 2 minutes and then they check out. And I feel that I have to be honest to myself and just observe that this leaves me with a decreased sense of meaning or meaningfulness. I mean, if you keep talking and no one's listening, or some of the people who are listening keep misunderstanding or pushing back or just not wanting to hear or being unable even to hear what it is you're trying to say, I experience that as counter meaningful, if that makes sense. So I share this with you in an effort to be honest, of course, but also in an effort to sort of just explore this observation. And I never thought of this until this day right here about an hour ago when I started taking notes for this episode, that when engaged in activities that in a sense undermine my search for meaning, I experience that as less meaningful, which ironically may also explain why the people I describe don't care about my podcast. Because they're simple, I mean, maybe we speak different languages, or I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I find way more satisfaction in running this tiny little relatively new channel here on YouTube. So that's something else I find meaning in. But still, I mean, I don't just want to sit here and say that I find meaning in making YouTube videos. If no one watched these videos, I wouldn't find any meaning in it. And I mean, even though we're doing pretty well, considering this channel has been up and running for a little over a month, I find that my own inability to explain what I mean, how I arrive at certain conclusions, is potentially compromising my sense of meaning in the world as well. I hope that makes sense. So I guess what I'm saying is, to me, meaning is found where an understanding between people happens. But I also find meaning in other things. So in relationships with other people, I mean, it can be very personal, intimate relationships, physical even, but it can also be on a much more abstract level, such as the relationship I have with some of you guys watching this right now. But I also find myself, for instance, taking a hike in this beautiful area I live in here. I always get the experience of meaning, but it's still a meaning in something that I don't personally believe it holds an intrinsic meaning, because I've arrived at an understanding that I don't want to believe things that I don't have good reasons for believing. I just don't want that. And of course, when I get like a sense of awe, a beautiful sunset, it is so tempting, and I truly understand the compulsion to think, wow, this can't be a coincidence, or someone must have created this, or I must be here for a reason right now. But I actually find meaning in the realization that if I chose to tell myself that, I would do so on an uninformed basis. I would not have seen, I'm not saying you haven't, I'm saying I haven't seen enough tangible evidence that is adequate to convince me that there's a creator or some higher power at play in this universe. I don't think there is. But I want to say this. Looking at the sheer improbability of me, an animal, sitting here in this partially unspoiled nature, partially well planned out, even designed by fellow humans environment, and I have a hard time even saying that and trying to explain why I find meaning in that. And that on its own actually leads me back to my first claim I made a minute ago, that meaning must be considered subjective. And I just want to say, I am always very weary. It's always a red flag for me when people talk about, oh, well, it's true to him, or that's my truth, or, you know, there can be many truths at any given time. I mean, I don't believe in that. In that sense, I believe in some sort of objective reality, regardless of what that reality may be. but this, like a strict value relativism, I'm sort of against that. But I realize that when we're talking about the very big questions, such as the meaning of life, I may have to just accept that that could be a thing that is per definition subjective. There's actually at least one more thing that I find meaning in. So I mentioned nature, I mentioned other people, but there's at least one more thing that I find meaning in consistently, and that is building things. I don't necessarily mean it in a tangible sense, but I mean, even this channel that you're watching right now could be an example of that. Having an idea in my mind, as ethereal as it is, completely intangible, but working towards some idea, the realization of it, it's like blowing a flame that hasn't quite caught on to the firewood yet. There's certain satisfaction in seeing the fire catch on and then take a life on its own. And if you don't watch it, it might even get out of control. I mean, that can be very satisfying and meaningful to me. And I think especially if it involves making the world a better place and collaborating with other people and maybe even nature. So the more meaningful things I clone, the more cumulative meaning it seems to gather or turn into. And I realize I spent most of this video just talking about what's meaningful for me, but of course I justify that by saying that I think meaning is subjective. We could of course study it objectively, but that would quickly turn into a social science project, and I don't think the question you asked, Simon, really invited for me to do so. So I hope this answers your question to some degree, and I also just want to say there's so many subtopics that I could attack on the basis of this specific topic, but I'm gonna leave it at that, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, I'm Asger. You can ask me anything. Please do so in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, has value to me, and probably also to you, and you'll see me again tomorrow. Have a good one. Cheers.